Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you all for coming. I'm Kathy Martinez. I'm with CPOC, and this is Shekenya Edison. Shekenya Edison is a professional educator committed to establishing high expectations of vertical and horizontal accountability and shared responsibility in reimagining the educational system and improving overall outcomes and experiences for students and their families. She has vast experience and expertise from serving in various leadership roles for over a decade in diverse districts across California, always leading through the lens of equity. So Shekenya has served in various commissions and committees throughout the state of California, including Santa Cruz County's Youth Violence Prevention Task Force, Santa Cruz County Keeping Kids in School Task Force, Santa Clara County's Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative, Prevention and Programs Work Group, and the City of San Jose Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, along with other community initiatives. She is committed to improving systems through capacity building, cross-sector collaboration, and co-creation, developing meaningful relationships with the community, as well as providing equitable policies, practices, and access. Through her leadership and partnerships, districts and community partners have implemented processes, programs, initiatives, and/or systems that strategically address the family, community, or systemic barriers that negatively impact youth thriving. Ms. Edison believes that a quality education has the potential to improve life outcomes for youth, their families, and the overall community. She is a strong, committed advocate for access to the right of a quality education. So please welcome Shekenya Edison.
Thank you all. Thank you. So hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here to have a conversation with you all. I go by Kenya. I will let you know the presentation you have. I updated, so there's a couple of slides that's not in there, but it's all right. Take your phones out. You can take a picture. We are used to, like I said, on the fly, having to adjust and adapt in the work we do, so we won't change today. I am a proud public servant in the education industry. I will tell you right now, there is a passion that will come off today that's like, calm down, but I can't. You know why? Because education has the potential to change life outcomes for kids. You know that better than I do, but I can tell you from the inside of education that we know there are barriers in place that prevent all students from having access to that quality education, especially when they are...
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, I don't know, they always want to put...
Right? So whether we go through this presentation or not, we still gonna have the same conversation, okay? So
you will go through it.
Of you. No, I'm just saying, no pressure on you at all. So while we're getting through, well, my friends are helping me here. I want you guys to just take a moment and think about, what is your why in this work, right? Because we can't show up for a paycheck because those come and go, and they were never enough, right? So, and we can't take that out on the kids because they didn't make the pay. But why are you showing up every single day? Why are you pulling in the parking lot? What's your personal or your professional why? Think about that for about 30 seconds. And for those of you who have never thought about it, I'll give you an extra 30 seconds because it's not an easy thing to land on. And then I'm going to have you talk to each other. So go ahead, think about that. Okay. A couple of brave souls. The why is important for us to reconnect with because life changes in our jobs, right? Like when we're in systems, depending on who's in leadership, things change. So, Judge Lucero, is that you? Hello, my friend, how are you? So, a couple of folks want to share out their whys. This is a safe space. We're in this together. We'll call it Vegas. What's said here, you know the rest. So, anyone want to share your why? Yes.
Be part of the solution.
Oh, yes, be a part of the solution. We don't need PhDs in problems. We can restate the problem all year long, right? It's how do we solve them? Perfect. Someone else. Yes.
Just to help people have a life of serving others, giving back to the community.
Oh, to help people, serve community. Oh, I love that. Couple more. Yes. oh my gosh, we need more of that. To be the reason that people believe in other people. Like humanity is not a lost cause, right? Even though that's what catches the quick video shots, right? But that ain't it. One more. Yes, ma'am.
To help eliminate some of the barriers and gaps that I experienced for future generations.
To help eliminate some of the barriers and gaps, right? Lived experience is the best education we could possibly have. So the reason that's important for us to kind of go through is, and you guys, you have the presentation, but we're going to figure this out, okay? So y'all bear with me. I won't play it. I will just show. There we go. So we'll figure this. So when we start talking about our personal, when we talk about our personal whys, we have to do that when we're coming into the building, because if our why isn't about results, it is for sure not going to be the work that's going to make kids better off, right? We are wanting to come into a system and contribute to it so that children, youth are better off because of having encountered us. Now, none of us are naive. We know how systems operate, right? They're established for a purpose. Many of our jobs are dependent on barriers. So when you start thinking about to eliminate the barrier means I may be eliminating my job, all of a sudden it makes sense to keep the barriers in place. But what I would challenge you all to do as we kind of go through this next hour and 45 minutes, yes, you have me that long, please reimagine your work, right? Reimagine the lives of our young people if they had access to a quality education. Reimagine that. I will take us through a journey of starting from the result all the way to our roles, right? And we know that the result that we're all working for is that young people graduate on time. Period, point blank, because access to that quality education has the potential to change their lives, right? That's just one step, but it has the potential to change their lives. The young people who you work with have extra life happening for them, right? Extra. I call them our ELKs, our extra love kids. They need all the adults in their lives to give them a little bit extra love to help counter the life that's happened in their time. We share kids, is what I say are threads, right? That means that they thread between multiple agencies. How do we come together to support educational attainment for probation foster youth so that we can make sure that they're okay? The first thing is believing that they deserve better, right? How many show up saying, yeah, what they get is what they get and you don't have a fit? Right? That's the preschool motto. I learned that from my daughter when she was in preschool. Right? You get what you get and you don't have a fit. Yeah, not so much, sweetheart. In mommy's house is what I say go, right? But that she didn't get that. But so for me, for the work that we have to do today, it really is to link us together so that we are moving forward. You guys all good? We will make this work. Y'all enjoy. So results-based leadership is the framework that I use in the work, and it is to make sure we're moving from the end back. Some of the stuff we're going to have to do is try something different, right? That Plan, Do, Study Act, we have to try something different. Kathy, can I have one of the printed copies if there's any more? Thank you so kind. Oh, thank you. You rock. Thank you. Now he needs one. All right. So if on this slide here, you guys can take notes there. So this is NEEKC's foundation, kind of talking about the result in the middle and working with program populations, right? So if it, thank you, you rock. I sure will. Thank you. Give them all a hand. Give them a hand because find a way to make one. Thank you. So when we talk about our target population, we can't go equality in this work because one solution won't fix every problem. We can't. Stop it. I know everyone's like, everybody should get the same. No, they should not. Right? We want students to get what they need, when they need it, from whom they need it. All right? And so that means in our program population of making sure that all of our students are on track to graduate, we got to focus in on our target population. When we look at our students who are on probation and making sure that they're on track to graduate, what do you think they need? What do they need? Just from your experience with young people on probation youth, what do they need to be on track to graduate?
Stability.
Stability. Support. Structure. What else? Guidance. Encouragement. So we're going to talk about how relationships contribute to student success or young people's success, right? Because we're talking all students. How relationships trigger into that. You have some data in your packet. For me, every conversation has to be rooted in data. Our impact has to be to impact the data. It's great to do stuff that make you feel good, but if it only stops at implementation and doesn't move to impact, we're doing a disservice for young people within our system. So let's look at this first probation youth data. When we're talking about outcomes, educational outcomes, what do you see in that data? What do you see in that data? Educational outcomes for probation youth. Yeah. Significantly lower. For all the reasons you just stated, right? They don't have stability. They don't have support. They don't have encouragement. For every reason you just said, we know the impact of those actions or inactions. It is a negative impact on young people. And we've just acknowledged that access to a quality education has the potential to change their life outcomes. So if we're not even securing that first bonus for them, we have problems. What's the next data point tell you? Take a look at these squares. Breeze over those. What stands out to you? What stands out to you? Yes. There's a reason a law was enacted to make sure that foster youth, right, whether probation or through child welfare, have continuity of school attendance. The sad part is we had to have a law to make it happen, right? When we talk about structures that are barriers, and my friend over here talked about wanting to remove barriers that share self-experience, when we talk about barriers that are in place, they're there for a reason. They get the outcome they were designed to get. So when we have to implement a law to do what's best for kids, that tells you how deeply entrenched we are in harm, right? Because we need a law to fix it instead of just doing what's right. What else does the data show on this page?
It talks about the high percentage of probation youth removed in the year before they graduate, which is super realistic.
Very realistic. Like you're almost to the finish line and then you go, oh, different finish line. Different background, different zone, but still make it there. But still make it there. What else?
Only 2% are ready for higher education.
So we're saying we're done with you within this system, although the systems change and we extend care and support for students. Go make it. Right? And that's kind of what we're saying. Go make it in your adult years. We used to say career or college, and then we said career and college. I want to add career, college, and community. Are we preparing young people to funnel into the community to be community members? That first threshold of a high school graduate, a high school diploma, we're already saying our system isn't built to fix it, fit into our system, or find another way. And what's the other way they find? What's the other way? Say that again? When they're not prepared, when only 2% are prepared for life after high school, what do the other 98% do? Come on, Vegas, we all having this conversation. When probation foster youth are fed into society, not prepared for life after high school, what are their choices?
They do what they have to do to make it.
Survival.
Right.
And what is that normally? When I gotta do what I gotta do, what is that? Crime. Homelessness.
Continuing the cycle.
Cycles of dysfunction, poverty, violence, right? So we all have a sense of urgency to ensure that first threshold, high school diploma, right? Is it still moving? So now you guys get all the love. Moving ahead of me, huh? It's all good. This is the California dashboard. How many of you are familiar with the California dashboard for education? Get familiar with it so that you are able to walk into the counties you're working in and know your specific data, okay? This is statewide data. This is looking at all of our students throughout the state. Foster youth in the state of California, when we report up, we do not report whether they're child welfare or probation, right? We just say probation youth. We say foster youth. But I can assure you this might be a 50-50 split. We don't know that. But I think we can extrapolate from the data we're going to look at that it equally applies to whether you're placed through child welfare or probation, okay? What percentage of our students in the state of California, this is the 2021 school year, is foster youth? How much? Yes, less than 1%. So how much attention are they getting? Right, right? So when you have students on your caseload, they are your main attraction. But you have to realize they're such a small percentage, they're lost in numbers. So we know what equity says. Equity says that the kids who need it get it, right? And not only do you get what you need, when you need it, from whom you need it. That's what equity is. So when we're looking at this data, we can't say the number's so small we can't focus on it. We have to say the need is so great, we have to focus on it. Less than 1% of our students, which means the conversations aren't happening as often as they should. You show up to school sites. I'm the director of student services. I've been in that role for going on 12 years, just accepted an assistant soup position, and I'm almost a little sad, right? Because I've been so hands on the ground. I've worked across 3 different counties doing this work very closely with probation in Santa Clara County, Santa Cruz County, and now I'm down in Riverside County. But this is the work. When you show up, you are our partners, but you're our accountability partners. You have to hold education accountable for the work we have to do. And we're going to talk about the work we're required to do in education, so now you're equipped to have that conversation. The last slide in my presentation, it'll be a QR code that'll take you right to my website that has all the handouts that I'll be talking about today, okay? So you don't panic, don't fret. So let's talk about, so we talked about that data. Hold on. I done went forward ahead. All right, so we know it's less than 1%. This is our graduation cohort data for the state, right? On the bottom, you can see that our graduation rate is 83.6. Uh-oh, here we go. 83.6. Here we go. So when we talk about 83% of the students in the state of California graduate, this does not include students who left our system, right? When you send a child to placement, if they are sent to either juvenile detention or placement, they all of a sudden are moved out of this number. Oh, adjusted, right? They adjust the numbers, right? And I have on my website the CDE definitions that you guys can look at for each of these subgroups. So when we look at 83.6%, of course we want 100% of our students to be graduating. We do, not the reality though. But when we look at our foster youth, bottom, all cohorts, 55.7% of our foster youth graduate. Reactions to that number? Thought it'd be worse. Any other reaction?
So hard to dig out if you don't even get to that point.
So do you think foster youth do better or worse than other subgroups in the school? Let's talk about EL, migrant, homeless. You think foster youth do better or worse? Worse? Yeah. When we look at our different subgroups and our students show up every day with life happening, 55.7% of our foster youth graduate, which is the lowest of the subgroups that the state monitors. So when you think about it, you think of foster youth as going, life is happening, but they're going someplace. Homeless youth might be sleeping in their car with their families, right? Okay, this is distraction. Okay, you have it here, maybe not. They may be sleeping in their cars, right? So when we start talking about what about a child who supposedly, in theory, has all the systems wrapped around them and supports wrapped around them to help them, one, counter life, and two, succeed, but still fare far worse than every other subgroup the state of California monitors. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Yes, sir.
Well, with a homeless family, there is, based on this, and I think anecdotally, more stability. They may have less stability and less predictability in where they're living, but in terms of the family unit, there's more stability. In a foster family situation, or foster care situation, in relation to a family unit, there's less stability.
Mm-hmm. The family is still together, but they're just unstable together, right? So that means there's some kind of support that's in that natural support of family that is helping homeless students or families in transition, as I like to say, because homeless is very labely, our families in transition, helping them succeed. Yep. Anyone want to add to that?
Maybe they also have a reason to succeed, that the family wants them to do well, or they want to do better for their family.
Mm-hmm.
If we can wait for the handheld, please. Is it all right if you ask your question again? I'm so sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Can you give her, Kathy, can you give her the?
I was just saying, perhaps there's a reason for them to succeed because either the family really wants them to do well so they can get out of that situation, or they want to do well for their family to like better the family situation.
Right, so they have encouragement to change their life outcomes. They like, I got a role in this family. My role is to do better than my parents did so we can change our life circumstances. And because I'm part of a unit, I have encouragement to do that either directly or indirectly, right? Because if you're homeless and sleeping in a car, that is an indirect motivation that I don't want to be here any longer. Is that correct? Right. So when we look at how we adjust and shift the work that we have to do, it is about doing something different. It may be that we are scaling up stuff we've already done, but it really is about how do we reimagine the work? How do we reimagine outcomes for our young people? How many of you are familiar with the PDSAs? Yay. So a PDSA says we are planning to do something to change the way our system operates, to remove barriers. We're going to study it to make sure it's giving us the outcome we want. And if it is, we're going to scale it up. And if it's not, we're going to change some stuff and try it all over again. PDSAs happen all the time. All the time they happen. We're going to bypass videos. Let's see, that's all right. We don't want to mess up flow here. So when let's go to this PDSA thing. So we have to be responsive to data. Let me tell you one thing I know about education that we do. We say our probation foster youth are not graduating. Our data tells us that. We're going to give them all backpacks. Does that solve that problem? You guys are laughing because you know it happens. You show up, kids get free backpacks, right? Is it responsive to the problem? Because what's the problem? What's the problem?
Lack of stability.
But what did we identify? They're not doing what? Does a backpack resolve stability? It sounds crazy, right? But it's what we do as systems. The other things you identified is empower them and support them. Does a backpack solve that problem? So I'm not the only one in education. I'm sure in your systems you all do things that you're like, we're solving this problem, but we're doing it with that, and they don't match. So when we talk about PDSAs, we are very intentional about ensuring that the PDSA is responsive to the data, right? And that we are, I love the term co-creating results for kids, right? You talk about NEKC, they have the results counts, right? Everything's about a result. Is that we are partnering, we are walking away with ownership and actions to improve life outcomes for kids. And in this case, we're talking about education attainment. Then we always look to see who's better off because of what we did. It's not enough that we feel good we did something good. Not that you guys do that in your, maybe that's just in education, right? Ooh, this felt good. And then you go, but what's the data? I gave everyone in my department a mug that says, nice story, now show me the data. So I'm passive aggressive when I go to meetings and I pull out my mug and sip real slow. Because the reality is we've operated in systems on narratives for so long, it has negatively impacted young people. So when we implement things, we always need to come back and say, who's better off because of it? If kids aren't better off or families aren't better off, it felt good, but we need to abandon ship, right? Or tweak or adjust. If it's getting us the results we need, we scale it up. We go, oh, this worked good. We did it at one school, let's do it at 2. We did it in 1 county, let's do it in 3, right? That's that work. But we can't do that work in isolation. I am a firm believer that every person in the meeting adds value, and even the most dysfunctional families are a support system for their children. We see families walk in and we adjust how we are going to work with them based on watching them from the parking lot to the front office. It's true. We have mental models about kids and families, regardless, for whatever reason, our own belief systems, that impact the level of care, support, and services we offer families. So when we start talking about relationships, I say it has to be a meaningful engagement, which means you are an accountability partner for me, and I am an accountability partner for you. I like to discuss frameworks because we can get into, I think, I feel, I hope, I wish, a lot. But I want you to walk away with tools that you can share, and they're all in here and on my website. So when we're talking about supporting a young person to ensure that they graduate, who needs to be at the table? Who needs to be at the table? The student, the caregiver, adult, Who else? Is it who? Teachers. Oh, educators. Nice. She said, yeah, maybe. I saw your face. Who else?
Anybody that's part of your support team.
Anybody who's part of a support team. That's an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, a sibling, because the village has to activate, right? The village needs to be in place. When we talk about meaningful engagement, that means you show up and got decision-making power. What you have to say is valid. There's no bad idea. Everybody owns something. And so I like to use in education, I've been like trying to brainwash everybody I get to talk to, the framework from Search Institute, which is a developmental relationships. Developmental relationships gives us an action, like there is something we need to do. I'm not sure if this slide is in your presentation, but take a moment and read this. By moment, I meant 60 seconds. You saw that? Oh, it is in there. Wonderful. I'm going to ask you for some reflections on that data. Reflections. What's the importance of this data? Wait for Kathy to get you the mic. So raise your hand so she knows where she's going. What's the importance of this data? Yes, sir.
Think about my question. It's preparing them for the rest of their lives. I mean, this isn't just about the trauma that they're experiencing or whatever they're trying to work through in
situations, to me it says that this is a resiliency piece that can apply to other, negative consequence or negative things happening in their life beyond just that moment.
Yeah, it's transferable. The impact of having a supportive family unit or support system, it is transferable beyond just this piece. What else? What else is this data telling us?
And they also have, just like your probation use has a chronic plan.
Optional
They have an individual program.
or very necessary?
And then we recommend that you have
Very necessary. So when we start talking about those strong relationships, we have to identify what do we want out of that, which we'll talk about right now, but it is very necessary. Very necessary. And I was sharing with Kathy, watching the documentary earlier, I thought, perfect example and segue to talking about meaningful family engagement or a natural support system, because the impact it has on kids. So when we talk about the developmental framework, you have within your packet, that's this here, and I know it's super small, so I will try and get to that slide so you can see that. Oh, there's no better there. Let's see if,
a normal person with PTSD.
all right, let's see. It'll cooperate for a minute, I'm sure. So let's look at the framework there. There's 5 components of the developmental framework of relationships: express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. Does that sound like the things you guys mentioned in the beginning when I asked you what do young people need? Right? So when you look at the middle column under actions, and I know that's pretty small, folks, I'll read some of those off. We can't invite folks to the table and them think this is a spectatorship, like we just coming to watch. If you at the table, you got actions, right? You are committing to investing time, energy, and resources into this child's life, this youth's life. So when we talk about the developmental framework, when we're talking about expressing care, can you all read that? Is it legible for you? Yes. All right. Someone take the actions under express care for me. We'll just popcorn that out. Read out loud.
Be dependable.
You have a very deep voice, but Kathy's coming with the mic. All right, read those actions.
Be dependable, listen, believe in me, be warm, and encourage.
So when we say you're invited to the table and we're in relationship, we want some actions out of that. And those actions are listed for us. So there's no need for you to interpret that expressing care means I was being tough on the student, right? Like they need boundaries. Yes, they do, but that's a different element. When we're expressing care, these are the actions we're doing for young people. Because they need everything, right? They need it all. We have to be balanced. All right, challenge growth. Someone read those actions for me. Raise your hand before you read so Kathy can get to you. Oh, okay, you'll have the next one, okay?
Expect my best, stretch, hold me accountable, reflect on failures.
One of the hardest things I deal with in education is folks who are, this is that touchy-feely discipline. God, what does that mean? Now, I call it a punch-hug approach, right? Because I'm going to punch you with some accountability, but I'm going to hug you with some supports too, right? Like I'm going to do both. We're not doing one or the other. Because the idea is to change behaviors, right? It is not just to say, I built relationship. It's also to change behavior. So we need the accountability piece. So that whole punch-hug approach, I'm like, what? And then I had someone offensively say, one of my admins say, oh, this is hug-a-thug. That's all we do now, is hug-a-thug. And so I'm the person like, oh, I'm on my way, let's have this conversation in person, right? Like, let me help you work through your mental models that you thought that was appropriate, right? But the reality is, yes, students or young people who are making bad choices need accountability, period. You heard Jethro said in his thing, and when they were having a conversation at the table, right? And the mom said, there will be accountability, right? Like there's a consequence coming up. Yes, we need that. But kids don't only need that, right? Our young people who are making bad choices need to know that their behaviors are unwanted, but they are not, right? Because we could totally send the message that they are unwanted, particularly on our campuses and school. right? We definitely have an expectation of perfection for young people. We want them to be perfect when they show up. We don't take into account their adolescent brain development. They show up impulsive, irrational risk takers. That's what they showed up as. So we have to be cognizant of that. So providing support. He's way over there, Kathy. I'm so sorry.
Get my steps in.
Thank you. All right, so navigate, empower, advocate, and set boundaries.
Comprehensive approach to relationships. All of these things. The study that Search Institute has done, it's been 25 years long. They are constantly evolving. They have spoke to over 6 million young people ages 13 to 25. So when you talk about research, oh, they've done it. Been there, done that. So the basis of their recommendations is from young people themselves. They're saying, this is what I need in my life, this is what I had to help me be successful. And then they say, let's package this up so when we say relationships, we all mean the same thing. It doesn't necessarily mean we have the same last name or share blood. It means that I have a commitment and investment in you. And I'm going to show you that by my actions. And these are the actions they said that have the best impact. Share power. Someone read those actions for me.
Respect me, include me, collaborate, and let me lead.
Thank you.
Respect me, include me, collaborate, let me lead.
So let's talk about that word respect. Does it mean the same thing to everybody? Tell me why.
Well, because form of respect.
Oh, 1 second. Can you wait for the mic? I'm so sorry. We want to capture your wisdom.
You usually have such a very loud voice. It can depend on culture and all sorts of different factors, what is viewed as respectful.
And when young people say respect, how do they perceive respect? And I'm going to stop asking y'all to speak so that Kathy will still be a friend afterwards.
You just raise your hand so we get the mic to you. If we want to hear you, we're recording this.
Go ahead.
Young people want to have, for them, respect means hearing their voice, having the ability to share what is important to them.
So when we say respect, it's important that we understand that there's cultural nuances to that. There's generational nuances to that. There's zip code nuances to that. So we can't walk in with that one size fits all, which is so important why young people's voice have to be at the table. And there has to be the pre-meet before the meet so that we're preparing them to be in a space and we're preparing everybody else to be in that space to make it about the kid, right? Because we can show up and it be all about us. It'd be all about ego, it'd be all about power, it'd be all about, I got someplace to be after this, so we're gonna rush through it. We can't do that with our young people, particularly when they are involved in your system and our system that's entrenched in barriers and harm. We have to have a different conversation about that. We really, truly do. And then I'll read that last one, expand possibilities, inspire, broaden horizons, and connect. So when we talk about the relationships, it's important. How many of you know about 40 developmental assets? All right, tell me about what you know, sir. Sorry, Kathy, I said that was the last time. I lied, sorry.
Nothing interesting. I should have kept my hand down. No, it's been around a really long time, and it's kind of like a strength-based way of looking at how to develop protective factors, if you will, pro-social stuff.
Yeah, so from those 6 million young people that Search Institute interviewed, they found 40 assets that all of them had that helped them be successful. You have it on the page there. You can go to my website and click to find out all the research behind it and all that. It's on the resources page. And when they talked about supports for young people, the 6 assets that they had was family support, positive family communication. You heard, and I don't know where I was it over there or someplace, where folks was talking where if they only have, it was on the video. They said if you only have the communication that you're cussing everybody out at home, then that's how you go out and deal with the world, because that's the skill set you have honed in on, right? It's been modeled for you. You got a PhD in it. You go out and you live it. And so positive communication, other adult relationships, that's that whole village. Who rallies for the kids? I'm a yaya. I have 3 grandchildren. So I worked really hard to make sure they had a village. Because if, yaya drop off the face of the earth, they still need somebody picking them up for Yaya Fridays. They still need to be able to make cookies, do the Easter egg hunt like a grandma would, right? So it's important to activate others in your circle. A caring neighborhood. When kids walk down the street to go to the store, how many folks are saying, hey, how you doing? I saw you at the game. I heard your instrument playing. Like, how many people are invested and engaging in the young people? And then caring school climate, right? For us, that means that at school, kids feel valued, supported, seen, and included, right? Not that everybody says hi to you, but the experience that young people have is that they're valued, supported, seen, and included at school, right? When they're walking through the campuses. And then parent involvement in schooling. And when we can't get a parent, it's important that we have a surrogate. Who's showing up so this student know that they matter, right? So the 40 developmental assets is really entrenched in the work that you saw in the video today. They were trying to provide protective factors, which are preventative and intervention. That's what that was about. So let's talk about how do we link up our resources. So when we start talking about the result we're shooting for, a long walk to say, we're talking about how do we ensure that probation foster youth graduate on time so that they are prepared for college, career, and community. Right? How do we link up as people who care for children? How do we build relationships that's built in action? Right? How do we co-create results for kids? How do we make ownership for that? And then make sure that we link our resources so that kids feel like that they can succeed, which means we're going to have to interrupt some stuff, right? We're going to have to interrupt some barriers. So question for you all. Do results dictate resources, or do resources dictate results? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first?
Resources with the results.
The resources dictate the results? Okay. Anyone else say otherwise? Yes, ma'am.
I would say just because we are very reactive, unfortunately, that the results often end up dictating the resources.
Mm-hmm. So we operate in reaction mode. We do. We go, well, this is all we have, so this is what we're going to do. So that's the results dictating the resources dictating the results. How we should respond is, what are we trying to accomplish and what needs to be in place to get there? We should start with our results. What needs to be in place for every child to graduate on time? And then we refocus and reimagine our spending, our budgets, our people. I say people, time, and money, right? People, time, and money. If it matters, we put people, time, and money behind it. So if we're starting saying we want every child to be on track to graduate, and then we see our probation foster youth are not meeting that, we target in and say, well, what do they need to make it happen? And you're right, that's not how we operate. We say, they're not graduating, we have money for backpacks. Am I lying? Because that's our budget. We don't say, well, where can we repurpose spending and ensure that we're investing in transportation, because we said they move schools, particularly their senior year. How are we making sure we have a budget so no matter if they're still in the county, we're transporting them back? And they're finishing their senior year here. And we'll give them a backpack, but that's not going to impact the graduation. Like we gave all our foster youth new shoes. That's wonderful for them to wear. But remember, our result was we want them graduating. So are we investing in tutors, right? And I'm not saying any tutor, high quality tutors who can meet their individual needs of huge gaps, because we do know our foster youth, whether probation or child welfare, have huge gaps in knowledge. Huge chunks of credits missing. One, because of a structure that folks say we don't issue partial credits. And then we had to do what? Have a law to make that right. They weren't here too many days. I can't issue a grade. Law says different. Right? It's important to know that. So it is important to know that we do work from the result and then we staff backwards. So if I said to you, I'm infusing in your system $1 million for you to partner with education to make sure kids are getting what they need, how would you spend it? Think about that. I'm saying I'm giving you $1 million. The only qualification is that you partner with education. You know your students' needs. You're visiting them in their facilities. You're visiting them in their out-of-home placements. You know what they need. How are you going to partner with education to meet that need, to ensure that they're graduating with all their credits? Think about that. I'm going to have you share with each other, and then we're going to share out. How are you spending that money?
We would like $1 billion. Then we have exorbitant salaries for ourselves and some jets. No, it was just about like deepening the level. I'll let them speak for themselves. One of the things that I brought up was just deepening the level of engagement. I thought about a couple of your slides about that consistency piece we talked about before, and that one of the things that happens with all those disruptions and all that movement is like these kids don't have access to coaches. So there goes a positive role model. At least most coaches, not the ones that had to coach me because I was uncoachable. And then they lose access to things like band and choir and all those things where all those different relationships come in. And I think I don't, especially after COVID, I don't take any relationship for granted, even just the little stuff that was available to us. And I think it's probably equally important or even more important for a child that's used to so much disruption.
So we're talking about how are you going to spell that million with an M, not billion with a B, although I get it. And I was sharing with Jess and Sarah, I have 3 things I tell people when I step into a job. The only 3 things I won't do is illegal, immoral, and unethical. Everything else is on the table for kids, and they just need to know that. If it don't hit them 3, I'm doing it for kids. Period, point blank. So that is my mantra. Feel free to take it. All right, so who else were you all in the same group? Okay, so we're gonna just go down the line and make it easy for you, Kathy. All right. Oh, go ahead. Oh, you don't wanna share? Okay, so who else over here sharing what you did with the $1 million?
We kind of thought outside the box, like transportation, like thinking rural counties, how do they get kids to school, parents who are working 2-3 jobs, and then after school or before school activities. I have a friend who's in education, and she's like, all the before and after school programs are like waitlisted. There's not enough staff to get these kids, so it'd be good for probation for keeping kids out of trouble and having activity. And again, back to what you said, the community support, so getting involved in your community.
Yeah, keeping kids and during those critical times, positively engaged, partnering the way he said as well, because we know when kids are not in structured environments, they are more likely to be a victim of a crime or participate in one. So how do we use that $1 million to say, how do we get them here? Because a lot of before and after school is parents got to do it. So if that's already a barrier, how do we eliminate it? So transportation is a great spin. I would have went transportation as well. All right, moving back. Anyone else sharing? I just want to go through the tables. How you going to spend the $1 million?
So we had very similar ideas of transportation, extracurricular activities, but 2 other things we talked about was possibly having like some tutoring services. Maybe they can be like individualized, whether in the school or inside the home, so they can be direct. And we also talked about wellness center development, so they can have some clinical support, tutoring services there, and whatever else they need inside the wellness center.
Nice. We're talking whole child here, right? We're talking not only academic, but behavior, social, emotional, and mental health. How do we make them well in all areas? Right, so that's great. Transportation. And remember, our goal is graduating. So all of those directly relate to kids walking across that stage and having us all screaming like crazy when they get their diploma, right? So that's great. All right, go ahead, sir.
You guys pretty much covered the tutoring and transportation, but we were thinking possibly like community liaisons for services like drop-in centers and stuff like that for the more rural communities and more urban environments as well.
Yeah, Yeah, because one of those things we said is we're empowering them, right? And then for them to advocate for themselves. They know when they need to tap out and tap into services and support. How do we make them available all the time so they could do that? It doesn't help if we say it's only from 2 to 4 on Wednesdays. Like life don't happen every other day of the week. So that's a great investment in the funding. That's a great $1 million investment right there. All right, moving up. You all want to share? Anyone here? No pressure. All right, we'll start back there. You all want to share from that back table how you're going to spend the $1 million? All right. Anyone else on this side? Yes, Judge Otero.
So when I was on the bench as a judge for 22 years, and I can tell you for sure that a kid in class was not in custody. And so I would pay middle schoolers who, I would tell them it was their job to go to school, and then I would pay them, and I would give them, let's just say $100 a week, but $50 in their college fund, $50 in their pocket. And then that way they're in school, in society, and they have a whole host of pro-social activities, so then a judge doesn't have to order them into a pro-social activity. So anyway, pay kids to go to school.
She needs $1 billion. She's already asked, and she told me to go to Google and figure it out. Okay, I got you. But yeah, so how do we ensure that there's a value in this work? That is really important, right? And so I do want to point out this slide here, because as we're talking about engagement and how are we making sure those positive relationships, whether it's via coach, whether it's via clinician, community worker, the impact of that work. It's not enough to implement, right? We got to make sure there's impact. So when we look at Search Institute's data, what we know is youth who have higher levels of developmental assets are less likely to engage in a range of high-risk behaviors, right? The more assets they have, you see that last column, that's 31 to 40 assets, they're going to engage in less than 1% on average risky behaviors. The less, right, the least amount of assets kids have, we know on average, it's about 8 behaviors that they're going to deal with. So yes, we want them in class, but in class, engaged with around positive adults who can help structure for them the expectations. And then when we talk about thriving, it isn't enough to make it. Like a lot of us maybe grew up in communities or know family members who just made it. We want kids thriving, right? What does that mean when you are thriving? When a kid is thriving, what are we going to see? What are we going to see when they're thriving versus making it?
Motivation.
Say that again?
Motivation.
They're going to be motivated, he said, right? They're going to be motivated. They're like showing up because they know that Judge Lucero about to get them $50 for their pocket and $50 for college. I am motivated to get to school every single day. I don't have to worry about going to work after school to meet my basic needs, so I can engage in a sport. Because I now have the time to do so, and my basic needs, we know that Maslow in education, we say we have to Maslow before we bloom. Right? Bloom's taxonomy is about how you learn, and we just want kids to live. We want them well. Right? So we want them thriving. So this data, the information that you have in front of you, I thought I had it for a minute there. It wasn't moving. It's important for us to know that we have work to do. That's why I'm saying that. So let's go ahead and talk about, sorry, I'm getting there, y'all, I'm getting there. So the work you have to do, some folks were talking about, well, what about when education doesn't cooperate and participate and we show up and they're barriers? Now, I'm an honest person. Yes, there's barriers, right? There's barriers between systems. When we try and collaborate between sectors, there's barriers. And yes, education has put up its own barriers. That is a true fact. But what you have on your side is the law. And there's tons of agencies doing the work that you're trying to walk in and do on day one. I was sharing with this front table, they said, well, who do we go to? The director of student services in any district in the state of California's work is to make sure the due process rights of foster youth, homeless youth, and every other youth on campus are protected. And because foster youth laws are embedded in our California education code, it's a due process issue when you deny them the rights. That's my position in every district in the state of California. right? That's the director of student services. It also, the law requires that every district have a foster youth liaison. Some of you may have reached out to those folks when you hit barriers, as well as a homeless youth liaison. So when you get stuck at a school site, that's not the end of the story, right? Drive yourself over to the district office and ask to speak to either the director of student services or the foster youth liaison, because that is their sole position, is to make sure that the due process rights of foster youth are protected on every single campus, okay? So that's an inside scoop. When we talk about bringing families to the table, the PTA has already said what that should look like, right? It's already said no matter how families show up, they should be welcomed into this process. This is a framework that they're pushing throughout the state as far as engagement. You'll hear many districts say, oh, we really focus on parent participation. Sometimes that means who signed up when they showed up, right? So they're just trying to get that number higher. Meaningful participation means I am a decision maker when I show up. I am invited to the table and have a voice at the table. My shared experiences are valued and considered, right? That's what meaningful engagement looks like. It doesn't matter how I show up, but that is how I am engaged when I show up on campus. The PTA throughout the state is doing a lot of work on that. In the state of California, we have really focused on MTSS. That's multi-tier systems of support. One person said, well, I had to, fight for a kid to get an IEP. Shouldn't be a fight. The reality is, when we're looking through the lens of equity, which MTSS, multi-tier system of support, says, how do we serve all of our kids with one system of response that has multiple different domains to meet the academic, behavior, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students. That means everybody plays a part in it. That means that we're focusing on who's leading our schools, and they're leading through the lens of equity. And this middle part, that integrated educational framework, the law says it isn't that you request your child be assessed. As educators, we should be looking out and saying, that child may have a disability. That's called child find. So every school district in the nation, because it's a federal law, has the responsibility to look out and say, yes, something may be amiss and interfering with that student succeeding in school. It is a travesty when high schoolers get identified with a disability. Because what does that mean? They've made it through all those other years not supported where they needed it most. So when you have to walk in, when a child returns from placement or is in placement, and you have to walk in and say, I want this child tested because something's not right, that means every year they've been in school to that point, they've been neglected. The needs, that equity lens of them getting what they need when they need from whom they need it, was neglected. And now we're trying to play makeup in their senior year, right? And that's not fair to kids. So the state said, how do we put in place and support with money, because they put money behind it and people, MTSS in every district, developing a robust system of prevention and intervention so that everybody's needs get met, and they don't have to get an IEP to have it met. An IEP, if they need it, great, but a lot of folks believe in education, the only way you get help is with an IEP. How many of you have heard that? You got to get them an IEP so they can get services. Yeah. Nope. Equity says really just the opposite. Take a look at this. I know many times we only see the middle two pictures. How many of you have seen this image before with just the middle two? How many of you have seen all four? Rarely, right? One person. Take a look at that. What we are truly striving for is justice. Remove the barriers. Why are we trying to give kids tools to adjust to the barrier? Reimagine what it could be. I don't need to give you a ladder to look over the fence, because I'm going to just remove the fence. The fence has no purpose. Besides the fact it was built there and we've always had it. You guys don't hear that we've always done it this way? That's just an education thing? Oh, okay. You hear it too. Got it. So how do we reimagine and show up and say, what's the purpose of this? If it has no purpose, get rid of it. The law that I'm referring to when I said child fine, it is our responsibility in education to help kids get to graduation. Not within the system we've always had, but in the system that is necessary. So with your young people who you say, yes, they've been struggling for at least the last 3 years while they've been on my caseload. The law says if we suspect, then we should be looking out and assessing students. That doesn't mean every child will qualify. We have what's in education called that two-year discrepancy, which means when kids are 2 years behind in education, 2 or more years, they automatically are going to qualify. But it could be a system problem and not a disability problem. It could be that we haven't met their needs, or we have moved them out of school so many times that they are obviously behind 2 years, and just depending on a discrepancy model of assessing for IEPs, they automatically qualify. But removing the barriers is having a system that supports kids no matter what program they're in, right? How do we make sure it's robust? You all know, I'm sure already, about AB 167 and 216, right? Yes. Kids who've moved there after their sophomore year have a right to graduate at the state requirements, not the district requirements. There are some barriers to that, right? Because when the kids qualify at the state, the 130, they're not CSU, UC qualified, right? They didn't complete A through G. It is not a guarantee. It is something that the school has to assess within 30 days of a student transferring in after after the 10th grade. They have 30 days to assess. If they miss the deadline, it doesn't mean like, oh, I guess we don't have to do it. Nope, still have to do it. You just missed the deadline, right? And then it's still the law, and the law is very specific about that. Still got to do it. And then it is up to the family or the rights holder to say yay or nay. It is not for us as institutions to say, well, we're going to graduate you at 130 because that really helps our graduation rates. It is what is in the best interest of the student. Can they realistically complete the high school graduation requirements by the end of this school year, and if they desire a 5th year so that they can have a high school diploma? Not what's easy, what's necessary. This is also on my website, so you don't have to memorize that. And then it is important for us to know that every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. Think about your life. You're privileged if that was your parents. If you go, yes, I sure did, and it was my parents, that's a privileged stance when you think about the communities we serve. So you may be a part of someone's village. So it's everything we say and do, right? Do we put our people time and money behind supporting young people in those relationships? That's important work for us to know about. So you have important work to do. I will end on the note I started with. Education has the potential to change life outcomes for young people, but not only for them, their families and their communities. So the relationships we make and the resources we make available to young people will support the result of them finishing high school on time. I thank you all for your patience. I know we had all type of problems going on, but it's all right, right? I appreciate the folks who came up and tried to help me. They were definitely people most knowledgeable in the work, doing far more than I could do. But if you scan that QR code, it'll take you right to the resource page on my website, and it has all the links of documents that I just shared with you, as well as some other resources that you can look at in supporting young people in education. I am always available because I do believe as a public servant, I serve the public no matter where I'm at. And if you have a question that comes up about a person being denied their rights, trying to enroll in a school district or any of those things, shoot me an email or text message, and I will make sure that I can respond to you and get you some resources so that you can walk in and advocate for that young person, because it is their right to attend school. In the state of California, we are the only state that has it embedded in our state constitution that every child between the ages of 6 and 18 has a right to a quality education. Not a subpar, not a partial, not a maybe, but a right to a quality education. Right? That's compulsory education. We are the only state who has it. I also have, if you go to the website, you can sign up for just updates I send out all the time. And I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, tech folks, for trying to help me out. And I will open the floor for questions at this time.
Thank you, Kenya. That was great.
You are so welcome.
So does anybody have any pressing questions for Kenya, or any questions, even if it's not pressing?
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Can you give us insight on anything that's developing within the state that you find hope in, on policy or on what can really make a difference with the graduation rates? You know, let's say bringing it from 56% up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything really moving that we need to keep our eyes on what's coming in the next decades?
Yeah. So when we're talking about the targeted population that you all serve. I think the state's focus on increasing the mental health clinicians within the state and funding schools to be able to have more qualified mental and diverse mental health clinicians is probably going to be the best thing since sliced bread. When we talk about meeting the needs of young people, the needs that young folks are showing up to school with, they're just different, right? We all went through public education or some form of education, and we know we had problems. But young people that are showing up are not only dysregulated in a social emotional type way, right? They have dysregulation. We know the difference between mental health and social emotional health is social emotional health is how you feel and your feelings, and mental health is about your thinking, right? It's your hardware versus your software. And so the fact that the state is investing in mental health clinicians at all levels, right? They're trying to invest in colleges to make sure they have recruitment and grants for more people to enroll in clinician programs. And there's also a huge community school grant that's coming out. So if you're in a county where your county hasn't applied for it or your school district hasn't applied for it, advocate for it. The community school model, not community school like kids get expelled, they go to community school, but community school where kids show up and all their needs are met at school, where they're funding a nurse practitioners, they have a medical center, they have clinicians, they have counselors, they have parent involvement or family engagement, because not all kids are raised by parents, some by families. So that grant is on its second cycle. I think they put about $30 million into it, so it's actually supported by the CTC, what are the teachers union? I can't remember the name of them, but that union. It's also supported by PTSA. So that funding, if your county or district hasn't applied for it, it requires either county offices or education LEAs to partner with community. So it's community and other sectors. So in our district, if we went for it, which we didn't, it would be I was partnering with behavioral health, right? Because they have tons of resources and services and supports. I would partner probably with Loma Linda because that is the local medical facility. So that grant, if your area hasn't tapped into it, definitely tap in, sign up for the alert, so the next iteration of the cycle, you can contact the school district and say, hey, we want to partner because we think this is great. So the community schools model is the way to go. There's a lot of money into that right now. You're so welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Kenya?
I have a question.
So you indicated that California was the only mandatory school attendance state.
It's the only state that protects in its constitution the right to education.
Okay, but it's also like 49 in the rankings. Isn't that accurate?
That is very accurate.
And so what do you think the disconnect is, that we would have this constitutional right but yet be ranking so low the only state in the nation to have a constitutional right to a good education. But any reflections on that?
Yes, so the views I'm about to espouse are those of mine and not this CPOC. So yes. For me, it's that we're trying to, instead of reimagine education, we keep on this reform, which means keep it the same. So the status quo of education means that everyone's going to walk in and learn this way because this is how I teach. Instead of us adjusting the expectation to, we will teach the way kids learn. We will meet the needs of kids based on their needs, right? So that's really shifting us from protections of employees to the needs of our clients. So we have to quit trying to give kids tools to deal with barriers and instead remove the flipping barriers. And so that means reimagining. That's why I said I'm giving you $1 million, reimagine, what would you do with it? Because in that image that I shared, that one, right? The only thing to do is to do right by kids. But let's have a real honest Vegas conversation. Barriers are keeping most of us employed. It's reality. Because if we reimagined our system, that our student or client populations began to reduce, some of us got to find new jobs. But for me, it's like great, because now I'm gonna work in a different industry that's like celebrating the success of young people, right? I don't need to protect the barriers. So I believe the reason that we are not in the top tier, even though it is a right, is that we have not agreed on what quality means. So when we say high quality education, what does that mean, right? The expectation of the folks who provide education, which is everybody who walks into the building is an educator, I don't care what role you have in the building, how do we reimagine it to get better results? Because education is the one place where you can show up every single day and kids not learn, and you still got a job. So we have to, we really do have to reimagine the whole sector. Yeah. 2 years, you're tenured. I can behave for 2 years. I mean, maybe. Illegal, immoral, unethical. Everything else is on the table, right? So yeah, so I just think it's about how do we start advocating and reimagining what we do in education.
We're also really large, and that's a point not to be lost, because in California, we're just so much larger than everybody else, and we're very, very guilty of epistemic arrogance. We think we know more than we know, and then we try to build this top-down, reductionist, mechanistic kind of approach to how we do education, how we do criminal justice, how we do social work, so on and so on. And it's a fundamental flaw in how we roll in California. And I hope that breaks up over time, because right now the trend is the other way. Mm-hmm. So I know that sounds highly political, but it's really more mathematical. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, when we're going around the room looking at how we would deal with $1 million, our answers are local and they're very individualized. And barriers are very individualized, literally. Mm-hmm. My kid looks nothing like your kid, looks nothing like your kid, and so on and so on. So when we try to come up with these uniform, we think we understand everything because the bell curve says X, Y, and Z, it's so far off. And in fact, a lot of times the data is misleading. So data is important, but so are the stories, the individual stories, because we learn from the outliers and the things that the bell curve doesn't explain. So, sorry, Director Lucero, it's probably more than you were looking for, but I think it's important to not try to make everything so uniform from the top down, and to be willing to invest in experiments locally. Because the local experiments, I know the state hates block grants now, but the local experiments tend to work really well in spots, and then we learn from those bright spots. That's how we get things like the 40 developmental assets. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I just think politically it's not a win, because if you're at the top of the state or anywhere near the top of the state, you can't say, you know, we don't know. But we'd like to experiment until we do, because humans are better at doing than they are at understanding, right? Like, that's just not a winning talking point, so I won't be running.
Yeah, so point well stated. And remember, you're right, the prescriptive, being very prescriptive, doesn't help kids. But remember, in the state of California, back 2008, we said, oh, we're going to back out at the state level and give local control to all school districts. So they said, we're just, we're not going to tell you got to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to say, engage with your community, and you all determine locally what you should be doing with the money, right? That was LCFF. That came through the local control funding formula. We went from there to now in every district, you have to do a local control accountability plan, which means engage with your community partners, your families, students, staff, and say how you spend this money based on your unique community. So what happened was, what happens when you give a kid a whole bag of candy and say only eat 2? Right? So we go, oh my gosh, all this money, everything we couldn't buy before, we gonna buy. We didn't target. We didn't do like our colleague said here and say, where's the need? How do we fund innovation? How do we remove barriers? How do we think outside the box? We said, let's fund what we've always done. We just now get to control it, what we've always done, with very little accountability. So I would challenge you all that in your own jurisdictions, call the district when it's time to make the local control accountability plan. Ask them how are they meeting the needs of probation youth, foster youth, right? Because foster youth is a monitored subgroup. Like, we have to have a plan in place for them. But I'm going to tell you right now, they're not making that plan based on probation foster youth. That's not the plan. Show up and say, oh, no, they're foster youth too. I'm going to need them to be included in the plan. What dollars, people, and time are you putting behind supporting them? The LCAP is written between about January and March. They have to go to the board actually coming up in the next month. It has to be approved by June 30th in every district. They have to have a public hearing about it, which means they hear from the public that say, oop, you left out this subgroup. I don't see anything in there about this. Go back, fix it, and change that. That's the LCAP, right? LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan. LCFF is the money. We are funding you based on your student population, so you spend that money on those kids we identified. Give us a plan for each of those identified subgroups on how you're going to support them and report on it annually. You want to be a part of the plan, because foster youth is a subgroup in the state of California that requires us to have them written in our plan. But I can assure you it is not meeting the needs of probation foster youth. It is generalized to foster youth through child welfare. So that may be a great place to partner and ask for a partnership and funding and co-creation. Any other questions? No. Did we get $1 million? I thought you asked for $1 billion. Yes, you got it. And I'll be honest with you, the transportation one is the bang. The tutoring is tutoring that go to kids and don't make kids come to it. Bang. Kids are more likely to access it. So when we start talking about barriers of access, it's transportation and it's getting to them, the services that get to them. We're going to always have backpacks because it's an easy thing to do. I got about 100 of them right now. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Kenya.